All right. So we are going to this coming week in the Torah. We're going to be reading yesterday in Torah in synagogues around the world. We combined two Torah portions because you got to squeeze 53 Torah portions into a year, and when there's a holiday on the Shabbos, it bumps. So there's a complex system to make sure that we always begin and start the Torah, reading the Torah on simplest Torah right after Yom Kippur, about 2 weeks after Yom Kippur. So there's going to be another combination this week. The first of the Torah portions focuses a lot on the service of Yom Kippur, actually, in the temple, which almost totally doesn't resemble anything we do on Yom Kippur. It was offerings in the temple. And the second Torah portion has a smattering of a lot of very interesting mitzvahs, including a lot of interpersonal mitzvahs and caring for each other, and gossiping, we could spend months and months on the second Torah portion. What the Torah studies curriculum is pointing us to is really something that's only very peripherally related to the Torah portion, and we're not even going to touch why it's related to the Torah portion. I'd probably need an hour here to explain some of the background to explain it. So it's a thought that is connected to the Torah portion. It's a valid Torah thought. It's connection with the Torah portion. If you go to shul this week, you're probably just scratching your head trying to figure out what this has to do with anything. But it is launched from there. The focus is going to be on education. None of us here are educating our children anymore. We're always educating our children, but we're not raising little kids. But there is a point of understanding what education means, and we all, I'm sure we all do our own retrospectives on us and our kids, and then also we could think about what we would need, what society needs as far as education is concerned. But it's really about obligations and about the scope of the importance of preparing for an objective. There's a child as an objective of raising a good, healthy child. There's a lot that goes into it, and there's the responsibility and where that lies. So that's just a general overview. But now let's get into the actual text, and we'll start off with their trajectory. One of the things that is relevant, not to the Torah portion as much as to this period of time.
What page is it?
I'm sorry. It is page
24.
24. Excellent. We just recently celebrated Passover. Passover, if you go back 3,325 years ago, it's when the Jews were liberated from Egypt. They were liberated from Egypt. There was a twofold beauty and objective to it. One was get these people out of a tortured existence. Number two was bring these people, the Jews, to Mount Sinai, where they can receive the Torah and have this incredibly beautiful interaction, intimate one-on-one with the divine. So there was getting out of the negative, and then bringing them to this historic event at Mount Sinai. And there was 7 weeks between when they left Egypt until they got to Mount Sinai. There was a 7-week bridge where they were preparing themselves for this very special event. Now, that 7-week bridge event is enacted in a way every year. It's called the counting of the Omer. Counting of the Omer actually doesn't technically have to do with that whole drama. Counting of the Omer is that there was on the second day of Passover, and Passover is a spring holiday, and the first spring crop was a barley crop, and it's just like, I guess, in a business, and maybe you you paste your first dollar. There's something about that first dollar, and and a certain, hopefully, a sense of gratitude that comes with it. For the first crop, you really couldn't eat from the crop. You totally took some of it and you gave it as an offering. You gave it to the community. You gave it. It wasn't just about you. It was about something special. So that's a Torah idea, that whenever we earn something, when everything, so something special happens, we want to not only just be about us, but something bigger than us. So every year, the second day of Passover, an offering was brought of a measure of barley. That measure in biblical terms was called an omer. An omer is a measure. We call it an ounce, a pound. In the Hebrew, one of them is an omer. So then from the day you bring the omer, the Torah says, then count 49 days, and that will be Shavuos. That's what the Torah says. So in that sense, it's really framed agriculturally, not about getting out of Egypt and preparing for the way to a great experience at Sinai, but they're two parallel tracks of the same thing. Come out of Passover, Egypt, then there's 49 days to Sinai, or 49 days of counting from when we bring the Omer offering until we get to Sinai. Okay, so
There's only one question I have there.
I doubt there's only one.
I mean, on this specific point.
Okay.
Considering that they hadn't had time to settle down and grow crops, how can they be making first offerings of their crops?
A great point. It was in that first year, it wasn't that. For that first year, we're told it was only about the drama of preparing for Sinai. And they were given a mitzvah not for the desert, for when they get to Israel and they have crops, that's what it will be. So there were a good number of mitzvahs that they were given in the desert, saying you can't do it here, but when you settle, this is what you got to do. Okay. So let's go to 24, text 1. It says, the Torah says like this: you shall count for yourselves from the morrow of the rest day. The rest day means the Yom Tov, the holiday of Passover, it's talking about in this context. From the day you bring the Omer as a wave offering, they would bring it up and they would offer it. And the Omer is, again, this measure of barley. 7 weeks, they shall be complete. 7 complete weeks. You do the math, it's 49 full days. And you shall count until the day after the 7th. So after the 7th week is the 50th day, namely the 50th day from which you should bring new meal offering to God. That day, that's Shavuos, and Shavuos you would bring a wheat offering. Start off with the barley offering. 50 days later, you celebrate the wheat crop. But that was on the holiday we call now Shavuos. Text 2. This is from the Code of Jewish Law, written by the founder of Chabad. It is
the image.
Oh, thank you.
You want me to do it?
Yeah.
Oh, you want it?
I don't know. So,
You know, we-
okay. Did I just mess it up? Sorry for those of you at home. Trying to get this thing done.
Untying your shoelace.
Yeah, that's
It's similar to working with the Bible. You're untying knots.
okay. That'll work. Okay, thank you. You're going to see how to do it. Okay. So, text 2, thanks, it is a biblical mitzvah for every Jew to count on a daily basis for 7 weeks, again, starting from the second day of the Passover. Good morning, Larry. Starting from when the Omer sacrifice is offered. I think it's over here, or sit over there, or over here. Yeah, okay. I'm sitting there, the teacher. The sages interpreted the words "count for yourselves." What does it mean, count for yourselves? It might be thought that it is the Jewish court who conducts this count in the same way that the Jewish court counts the 7-year cycles and then sanctifies the 50th year as a Jubilee year. Just to explain a little bit of this, because it's a little bit off our topic. The Torah says count 7 weeks. Who's supposed to count 7 weeks? There are other counting cycles in Torah law. We have 7 years, or that's called a Shemitah. 7 agriculture years, and we count 6 years, and then in the 7th year, we let the land lie fallow. There's 49 years, and then a 50-year Jubilee year. All of those are counted for the community by the court. There's an official counting. So maybe every year, there should be the official court says, okay, second day of Passover, we start counting down 49 days. So, but count for yourself teaches us that every person must do the count. The congregation and the leaders are unable to count on behalf of the public. So there are perhaps even millions of people through the world who are counting the Omer every single night or every single day. Today is the 17th of the Omer. Yeah, I did it last night. I just don't remember what it was. And so this is something that there's a that it's a mitzvah. We go through this process every year. Okay, so there's this idea. There's this bridge between we don't have the offerings. I just messed that up. We don't have the offerings. Did I just do something? I closed. What did I close? Oh no. Okay. We don't do the offerings anymore, but we do the counting. Now, text 3 gives us a little bit, 26, it gives us a little bit more of the drama that's not the agricultural. Why do we count? This is from the Medrash. Why do we count the days between Pesach and Shavuos more than so than in any other festival? Why don't you count between Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, between Yom Kippur and Chanukah, or between Pesach, whatever? This can be compared to a prince who was out riding and found a man who has been cast into a pit. The prince told him, I will pull you out of this pit, and then after some time, I will give you my daughter as a wife. So there's a person in need, dire need, they're in a pit. Someone in power, in position of ability to help, has a twofold gift. I'm going to take you out of the pit, I'm going to give you my daughter as a wife. So we discussed before, there was a twofold objective, taking the Jews out of Egypt, get them out of the torture, bring them to Sinai. That's the metaphor the Medrash is giving us. Is like a person who's in stress, taken out of the stress, and actually then given something very special. The man grew tremendously happy and said to himself, not only will take me out of this pit, but he also wants to give me his daughter. He hadn't seen her yet. And the prince did just that. He took the fellow out of the pit, dressed him in fine clothes, and gave him gold and silver. When the man saw that the prince was true to his word, he began to count how long would it be until the prince would fulfill his pledge to give him his daughter. The Jews in Egypt were as if in a pit. So now they've come out of the torture of Egypt. They know they're going to Sinai to become a people, a mass conversion. They're getting the Torah. They're going to connect with God. They're going to see God eye to eye. And now, so they're saying it's 49 days. They start counting down the days. So today's the first day of that. The second day, it's before your wedding. You may have felt the way. It's it's only 3 weeks away. Now it's 20 days away, 19 days away. That's what the excitement we have. Now, if you think about that, so it was in that first year when the Jews came out of Egypt and they're heading towards this objective, and now there's 49 days, that was an exciting time. And if you think about it in terms of, let's say, getting married, so it's a wedding anniversary. The wedding anniversary is the Shavuos. We're at Sinai. So every year we celebrate getting out of hell from Egypt. Makes sense. Every year we celebrate our wedding, Sinai. What's the big deal about celebrating the days you were anticipating it? We're done. Imagine, if the day I got engaged, every year I do something for my wife. The day I got married, I do something for my wife. And now I'm supposed to say, but these are, imagine this, that 33 years ago, I was anticipating the wedding. That's not one of the things that resonates with me. It's the wedding and the engagement. So why do we make such a big deal out of it? And we obviously do. And one of the things that we find actually in Jewish law, where it's not as big a deal as the actual events of Passover and Shavuos, is you think about it, when we do a mitzvah, first time every year, lighting your Hanukkah candles, the shofar, the first time we do the mitzvah, we do the bracha on the mitzvah, and then we say a bracha called a shehechiyonu. Say shehechiyonu v'kimonu v'giyonu l'zman, which means thank you, God, for keeping me alive. Looking down at the grass, not looking up at the grass, and to get to this place where I'm able to do this mitzvah again. So shehechiyonu is always that first, and every time when Pesach comes, we make a shehechiyonu. Make blessings on this, the kiddush and the matzah and everything, but there's a shachiyanu. Oh, Pesach is here again. We got another chance to do a mitzvah. Sure, so we're going to make a shachiyanu. Counting the Omer, we don't make a shachiyanu. Count the Omer. So one of the early legal authorities on the late 1500s, he writes in text 4, we do not recite the shachiyanu blessing when counting Sfira. Why not? You make the bracha by on Pesach. You're going to make it on Shavuos. This is another mitzvah. It's no less a mitzvah than any other mitzvah. The reason for counting 50 days is because God commanded us to count 50 days from the exit from Egypt to the day we receive the Torah, as one who's waiting for a designated day when they're scheduled to receive a great gift or some other joyful thing. So it was really about the anticipation. It wasn't an event. It was the preparation for an event. This person would hope and be anxious for that day to finally arrive. Every day when the sun sets, they count the days gone and bless God that this day has passed and they're one day closer to the anticipated day. So too, God commanded us to count all the days and weeks leading up to anticipated day, the day when the Torah will be given. The purpose of this is to increase our love for the Torah and to show how it is dearer to us even than the day we left Egypt is the primary day we anticipate. Accordingly, Sfira is about the upcoming goal, demonstrating how time is passing until we reach the day the Torah will be given. Each day we bless and praise God that another day has passed and brought us closer to again receiving the Torah. That's it. We're going to Shavuos, we're receiving the Torah all over again, so we're in anticipation for that special day. But now we're just in the anticipation part. Accordingly, how can we make the Shachiyanu blessing when counting Sfira? When the desired day and primary cause of joy, which is called Matan Torah, when we receive the Torah, hasn't yet arrived. After all, we only recite Shachiyanu for a joyous occasion, whereas with Sfira, there's no joy. Thus, we don't recite the Shachiyanu blessing. So this is using what we're experiencing now as a launching point. There's a halachic idea. We want to understand how Torah thinks. And Torah thinks that if I had to travel to Israel to get married and it was a very special day, the traveling was full of anticipation, but it was just a means to an end. It's not something I'm going to celebrate every year. I remember I got on I bought my ticket. It was about the fact that I got engaged and now I got married. That's going to be my anniversary every year. I'm not going to go and relive the journey to it, because the journey it wasn't about the journey, it was about the destination. Now, thinking about it that way, here there's in an analysis of the Rebbe went into what is it that we have with children, and it's not only about children, but it's about responsibility. In this case, it's about children. Sometimes, let's say we are doing something to prepare for an action. Person, maybe an astronaut is going through simulated space launches in Cape Canaveral. Not that they're going anywhere, but they're preparing to go somewhere. It's the preparation. It's not the actual action that's the exciting that we're working for. Now, we need that. We need the simulation. We need the training. But the training is just a means to an end. It's not about the training. In most cases, you think it's about the objective where we're going. shift that and say, what about a child? An 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, who can understand there's such a thing as Shabbos candles, there's such a thing as charity, that there are things to do, there are mitzvahs to do, but they're not bar and bat mitzvah. And because they're not bar and bat mitzvah, and we say that we don't have the tools for self-discipline, and therefore you can't really hold them responsible for the mitzvahs, for keeping the mitzvahs, because they don't have all the tools necessary. Although individually, a bunch of kids under bar and bat mitzvah can do it as well as anybody else. But we don't, they're saying there's not a mitzvah. In other words, they don't have that burden, they don't have the obligation. So what are we supposed to do with that? Jewish tradition is, in the greater senses, the parents train them. So who's the obligation on? Parents. Obligation is on parents to train their children. Children are too young to have a square obligation. That is an attitude of Jewish law. Many of our early greats, Rashi, if you know the primary commentary in the Torah and the Talmud, and as among others, they say there is actually no mitzvah for that 12-year-old boy or 11-year-old girl to do a mitzvah, because they're not obligated. But there are other ways of looking at that. So let's take a look at first at text 5. This is from the Talmud. The sages taught, a minor who knows how to wave the lulav is obligated in the mitzvah of lulav, which is not what we were just saying. So this 10-year-old boy or girl knows how to wave the lulav, then they should do it. One who knows to wrap themselves in a garment is obligated in the mitzvah of tzitzis. Who knows how to preserve the sanctity of tefillin in a state of cleanliness, his father buys him tefillin. Who knows how to speak, his father immediately teaches him Torah and Shema. What part of the Torah is taught to such a child? It says Rav Hamnuna said we teach the verse in Hebrew. It's Torah tzivulanu Moshe Merasha Kilos Yaakov. The verse commanded us Torah. Moses commanded us the Torah, gave us the Torah, an inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. And what part of the Shema is taught to such a child? The first verse of Shema. So it says that a minor should do this stuff. Yet, if you look at text 6, because you can see from other areas of the Talmud, text 6, this is from one of the greats of the 1200s, is unanimous that a minor cannot discharge another person's obligation even if they reach a mature age. This is something we're getting a lot into some of the help. We're bound to this curriculum. So, but we're getting to some of the halachic minusha. That's very interesting, but it's not totally. I guess let's stick with it, because even if the point is something, the final point is something we can all appreciate. But let's try and understand this also. The standard is, let's take shofar. The 12-year-old boy, 11-year-old girl does not have the mitzvah to hear shofar. But you know something? They're Jewish. I want them to come to shul. Let them listen to shofar. The man or the woman, the adult outside, say, come in. We're about to make the blessing. You're going to hear a shofar. But the idea of who's obligated, technically it's not for kids. That's for education. Who has the obligation of education? Adults. Now, in Jewish law, there's an interesting wrinkle that when I stand up in shul on Rosh Hashanah and I blow the shofar, so I make a blessing. Everybody hears it and they say Amen. So it's as though they made the blessing. I blow the shofar and everyone can hear it. And we all discharge our obligations. I'm making the blessing. But I'm able to make the blessing and help everyone discharge the obligation because we're a unit. I'm obligated in it, you're obligated in it, and I'm a representative. There have been situations, because we like to have kids blow the shofar too, or younger, not kids, pre-adults.
English.
Yes, but we can't. But the thing is, we can't have someone on the bar mitzvah do that. and a benest, and it's nice. You want a kid to blow the shofar, but they can blow the shofar, but a minor cannot discharge, by Jewish law, cannot discharge the obligation of an adult. Help do something to discharge the obligation of an adult's obligation. Why? Because if they don't have the obligation, they're not sharing something with the adult. It's how can they if they don't have the obligation themselves, they don't have the standing to be able to relieve the other person of their obligation. So this is what you're saying here. It is unanimous that a minor cannot discharge another person's obligations, even if they have reached a mature age. This is a correct ruling, for a mature minor is not obligated to fulfill any mitzvahs, even a mature minor. Not obligated to fulfill mitzvahs, even by rabbinic standards. That's according to this authority. It is we, us adults, who are obligated to educate the minor in mitzvah performance. Therefore, it doesn't make sense for a minor to discharge anyone else's obligation, even for a rabbinic mitzvah. For anyone who isn't obligated themselves cannot discharge someone else's obligation. So that's a position in Jewish law. It's a broad position in Jewish law. But there are other positions in Jewish law, which is the way Allah goes. There's always someone else. So Maimonides has an interesting take on 7a. He says, I have an obligation. I'm a father. I have an obligation to provide my children education. Up to a certain age, I have, and literally, if I didn't want to pay tuition, a Jewish court could compel me to pay tuition for my kids' tuition. So it's on me. They're kids. How are they going to take care of themselves? How could they provide their own? So here in 7a, it says one is obligated to hire a teacher for one's son or one's daughter, while one is not required to undertake any expense to teach a colleague's child. We don't have. Of course, you want to help people. We give charity. We care about education for community. But the square obligation on me individually is take care of my kids. Now, what about a person who was not instructed by his father, is obligated to arrange for his own instruction when he can understand? Again, this will go for 2, as the verse states, and you shall study them and take heed to perform them. Maimonides says, what happens if my parents didn't send me to school? I didn't study Torah. So when I grow older, I have to teach myself Torah. I have to go get myself some schooling. But he uses an interesting language. He doesn't say when I become a majority, then I have to go take care of my own education. He says when I can understand, when I realize that there's a deficiency. And if you look at 7b, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe it makes a halachic comment here. He says, inasmuch as the father is scripturally obligated to teach his son Torah, it may be suggested that a scriptural obligation lies in the minor as well. Saying, why is Maimonides saying, again, we're going through some of these halachic gymnastics because we're trying to get to a point. Why does Maimonides say that if I was not provided a Torah education as a child, and now I went away to camp at 11 years old, and now I got to say, oh my gosh, I haven't studied anything. Do I have an obligation to teach myself? I'm only 11. I don't got obligations. I don't have to listen to shofar. I don't have to put on tefillin, so I don't have to educate myself. But Maimonides writes that when a child grows older enough to be able to understand, not that they become a majority, because that language is found all the time. Then the obligation sits on them. And the way it's being interpreted in 7b is that if I'm 11 years old and I went away to a Jewish camp and I found that there's such a thing as Torah, and I say, oops, no one sent me to Hebrew school, somehow I have something of an obligation to try and get this done. Now, I'm only 11. There's only so much I can do. But different than the way we usually look at mitzvahs, we say there is an obligation on me because it involves me. Even though it's not a square mitzvah on me, it really was on my parents. But it was about my life and my preparation for life. And therefore, it is something that is my education here's the bottom line of it. My education is not just about my parents' discharging obligation. It's about me and my life. And the Torah wants me to take care of my life. And therefore, when I'm raising a child, or we're looking at education, it's not just us as parents, our society saying, we got to take care of the kids. It's not about us only, it's about them. They need to have what they need. And we need to proactively pursue it, not say, listen, we got a system. We've created a system because there's often an attitude. I send many kids to school. You think, okay, the school's taking care of it. Maybe the school's not taking care of it. Maybe I have to be proactively look and make sure that this is my child is getting what my child needs. I'm not trying to get into current events here. Saying, but I have to get into. It's not just about saying, listen, I paid tuition. I was in Jewish schools. I spent who knows how much money in tuition over my life, and so these are capable people. I sent it to them. Do your work. Send them home fully formed. It doesn't work that way, because the idea is that it's my obligation, but it's also my child's obligation. What's my child going to do? They're a person. They're a person to themselves, not just my child. And therefore, I have to help them discharge their obligation. And in this sense, we can see in Jewish law certain areas where the Torah sees the child as having their own place within the community, and it's not just as just a kid, and we have to take care of them. They have their own standing. One of the things now we have in 13 days, no, I'm sorry, 12 days. There's going to be a Jewish holiday that's not very well known. It's called Pesach Sheni, the second Passover. Torah tells us that the Jews in the desert, the anniversary of Passover, they had to bring an offering. But for the people who had certain situations, it says they'd be traveling. I don't know if they were traveling in the desert, but if they were in certain situations, maybe they just performed a funeral, which is fantastic, but then there's a ritual way of getting out of the spiritual instability that comes with dealing with a corpse. They couldn't bring the Passover. So there was a chance for a second chance at bringing the Passover, and it's called Pesach Sheni. Sheni means the second Passover. So 1 month after Passover every year, it's not a big deal. We don't have offerings anymore. It's there on the calendar. Those who know, we make it. It's not a holiday, but people eat some matzah. Just remember, it's not a mitzvah, but it's a practice. In Jewish law, say what happens if a child turns bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah today. We have a bas mitzvah today. So that kid, that girl, she was not of majority when Passover came. When we had the Passover, if we were in those days and we had a Passover offering, she wouldn't have had an obligation. If she didn't have an obligation the first Passover, then theoretically she shouldn't have an obligation the second Passover, because the second Passover is just to fill the hole of someone who wasn't able to keep their obligation the first Passover. Yeah, Jewish law says they should bring an offering. Came of bar and bas mitzvah today, they did not bring an offering on the first Passover. They have an obligation, a Torah obligation, to bring an offering the second Passover. Why is that? Because when we brought an offering, the offering was one offering, but for a group of people. How many? You got to eat a whole lamb, so and it has to all be eaten at night. How much appetite do you have? So they would have groups of families would get together, take care of them, maybe able to eat, and everybody eats at least a little bit of it. Then they have the rest. They have a brisket, but at least it's all eaten. You count kids in that. They don't have an obligation, but they count, and they're part of the group. If they're considered part of the group, then it's not just they were consumers of a part of the Passover offering. They mattered, and if they mattered enough to be able to be part of a group to eat the first Passover offering, now that they become bar and bat mitzvah, they have to, because they missed that opportunity for whatever reason, they're going to bring the second offering. So in other words, there's a whisper of obligation for a child. I'm sorry?
Let's step back by a thought or two.
Sure.
The implication of the earlier part is you are not obligated to teach anyone but your son. Now, if there are kids who are disadvantaged, that implies that they are not part of the community.
Well, I mean, that's a separate thing. That's what I was trying to address that as I was speaking. This is not talking about the mitzvah of tzedakah. Mitzvah of tzedakah is if my neighbor's kid can't afford tuition and I have the ability to help. There's no direct mitzvah. I gotta give a check to my neighbor's kid, but there's a sense of responsibility I have for people beyond my family. That's something we're talking about here. But I have a direct responsibility for my kid. And it's not just, I want to be generous and help someone. It's my responsibility. That responsibility, let's say, if I did not do it, that responsibility is also on my kid, himself or herself, which is an odd thing, given the larger body of Jewish law. You say, so before that, you don't have a mitzvah. The point that's being made here, that the Rabbi brought up, is that according to many of these opinions, there is a value, an inherent value and obligation, even in something which is not technically a mitzvah. Mitzvah means commandment. A child's not commanded, it's not a mitzvah, period, you'd think. It's preparation for a mitzvah. It's training for a mitzvah, but it's not a mitzvah. The training itself, though, it has value. One of the things that they don't bring here, the Jerusalem Talmud brings a position which is not actual Jewish law, but it's in the Jerusalem Talmud, and obviously it's an important perspective. What happened about putting up a sukkah? You know what a sukkah is? What's the mitzvah? The mitzvah is not to put up a sukkah. The mitzvah is to eat in a sukkah. The mitzvah is you go into a sukkah and you have a little bit of sponge cake and l'chaim, and you make a blessing on the food, and you're saying, make a blessing, thank you God for giving me the mitzvah sukkah. Because putting up a sukkah is important, but putting up a sukkah is just setting the stage. It's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is being in the sukkah. Jerusalem Talmud says that when you build a sukkah, there's a bracha, a blessing to be made on building a sukkah. We don't do that. What's building a sukkah? Torah doesn't say you should build sukkahs. The Torah says you should dwell in sukkahs. In other words, you eat, you hang out there, whatever you're doing, you're bringing your life into a sukkah. There's no scriptural verses that thou shalt build sukkahs. But what the Jerusalem Talmud is telling us is that the setting the stage, the preparation, is also of such inherent value that you can make a blessing, even if it's not the actual mitzvah. Similar to that, again, this is not an actual Jewish law necessarily. Preparing for a mitzvah, if there's a baby born, if there was a baby born last Shabbos, yesterday morning, baby boy, and everything is well with the baby's health and bilirubin and everything, then there's a mitzvah for a bris this coming Shabbos. Now, surgical procedures are not permitted on Shabbos, unless they're life-saving. Cutting skin and drawing blood is not something you do on Shabbos unless you're saving someone's life. You're not saving someone's life by taking off the foreskin. But since there's a direct mitzvah to do it on the 8th day, this is something that is done. We do mitzvah. This is across the board. Jewish law says that the Torah wants us to do a bris even on Shabbos because it overrides Shabbos. That's why we do a bris on Shabbos. That's clear. In the Talmud, there's a whole section. So what about preparing for the bris on Shabbos? And there's a very, again, this is not in actual Jewish law, but there's a very weighty, important opinion of the Rabbi of the Talmud says you can go and chop down trees Shabbos morning and create a fire, and in order to do the ironwork, to create the blade, to cut the foreskin. You couldn't do that Friday. But that's not what the Jewish law would say today. But that position of the Talmud is, it's not only about the bris on Shabbos morning. What about all the stuff that's not the bris, but it sets the stage for the bris? That's also important. And that's really where this is going. That to look at a child's mitzvahs and say, it's only that. They're kids. It's just setting the stage. 100% not. It's setting the stages is critical. Take another thing. There's just in Jewish law, it says, what happens if a person says, listen, I can't study Torah, but I'm going to pay for someone's tuition. I'm going to support a school. The language of Jewish law, it's not, they don't have it here in the text, is as though that person studied. Anyway, you're talking about, he wrote a check, he didn't study. It's nice, it's good, put up a plaque, but he didn't study. Said, it's not, it's fallacious, Torah, Jewish law saying, to look and say, no, that's just setting the stage for Torah. Torah study, that's where it is. This guy just wrote a check. It helped, but it's just setting the stage for Torah study. No. That's the power of the mitzvah encompasses not just the actual action, but the things that bring to the action. So here they're focusing it on a child that pre-mitzvah mitzvahs, but none of us are raising little kids. But it's not just about that. It's the idea of the things that bring to the mitzvah. But back to use their launching point here. Look at text 8. Another thing, a place where Maimonides brings it, this is in Jewish law, where there's an area where a minor, even though a minor is a minor doesn't have any actual mitzvahs, is when it comes to the grace after meals. When we eat a meal, there is a biblical commandment to say thank you to God. So we call it benching, birkat hamazon, whatever it is. So truth is, in Jewish law, whenever we take a drink, whatever, everything, we always want to thank God. But biblically, it's only about a meal. If you've had bread, that makes it a meal. We make hamotzi on the bread, and at the end, there's the biblical commandment is to thank God. When we do that, if there are more than 3 who are thanking God together, there's a special preliminary that goes to it. And now the question is, who qualifies for the 3? When 2 people eat together, each person should recite grace after meals by himself. If one knows how to recite grace and the other does not, the one who knows should recite the grace out loud, and the other person should recite Amen after each blessing. Oh, actually, this wasn't even about the 3. In this manner, the one who doesn't know the prayer fulfills his obligation. The son may recite grace for his father. Sorry, what I said about 3. Forget about that part. It's also true, but it's not about this. What happens if we're sitting, we go to a restaurant and we're going to eat. I want to make a blessing. So either I could say, everybody, you want to repeat after me? You do that. Or what I could do is say, I'm going to make a blessing out loud. You listen and say, Amen. We're done. So here, what we're saying is, what happens with a child? Child went to Hebrew school. Parents don't know much. Comes home and says, Mom, Dad, it's dinner time. I want to make a motzi. And they say, we have no idea what you're talking about. So what? That child can say, I'll say it loud, and you say Amen, and we're good. Or say the grace after meals. Now, it's a child, it's a minor. We just said he can't do that with a shofar. Yet the Torah tells us, Jewish law tells us that in some, and this is the whole debate about where this is applied, where it's not. But when there is this more of a communal, a group action, and the minor is part of it, the minor can take up their own space. They don't have a technical obligation, but they can take up the space of an obligated person. And if you look at text 9a, it's puzzling. the Rebbe asks, how can we suggest that an obligation rests on a minor, even by rabbinic standards, if the minor lacks maturity? As the Talmud itself phrases it, with a question and an obligation for a minor? That doesn't work that way. So text 9b, let's look at where the Rebbe went with this, which is really where this whole this whole lesson has been going. Let us understand the role and part the minor plays in the midst of education. The minor is not just an actor without whom the father or mother wouldn't be able to fulfill his or her mitzvah of education. If you take a look, they put a meme here on page 23. There's this cartoon with a parent wagging a finger at a child, saying, "You're making it difficult for me to be the parent I always imagined I would be." I don't think it's there, but so it's a bit of a joke there. Why? Because the parent is saying it's all about me. It's not about the child growing up. It's that I have an image of what kind of parent I'm going to be. You're not letting me be that. Obviously, it's not about what a person fulfilling their image, self-image. It's about a child, this human being growing up to be who they need to be. So the Rebbe's point here is, the kids are not just actors in my life. Rather, the minor is the subject of the mitzvah of education, as the mitzvah is for the minor to gain practice. It's the minor. The minor is a person into himself or herself. They need to practice the mitzvahs in order to be who they need to be. So, inasmuch as the father's mitzvah is to educate the child to perform all mitzvahs, a sense of responsibility automatically lands on the minor, and that renders the minor a responsible party. So it's true to say that someone isn't a bar or bat mitzvah until they're 12 or 13. That's true. But to say, at least from many perspectives, including Maimonides, to say that person, that child of understanding has no obligation, that's not true. They have an obligation to take care of themselves. Is it the rabbinic mitzvah of shofar or blessings? That's overstating it. But to say that they are free of any obligation, they're their own person. They're not just my kid. They're not just on my arm and my leg. They're their own kid. They're their own person. When they grow up and they see what they get a sense of self, they need to take care of themselves. In other words, the father's obligated to educate, or the parent is obligated to educate his child to perform mitzvahs. Though the minor's mitzvah observance is an outgrowth of the father's obligation, it is the act of mitzvah performed by the minor that carries out that command. As such, the minor is rendered a responsible party, so much so that the minor is able to discharge an adult's obligation in certain situations. So now, we'll take this a little further. The text 10, having spoken about that, and the idea that even support for a mitzvah is itself part of the mitzvah. It's not just the mere support to be, God forbid, to be trivialized. So now, getting into the education, text 10. The only way to ensure, this is that a Jewish child assumes their own identity and creates a personal connection with the mitzvahs is if they are properly educated about them. This is in line with our discussion here, namely that the mitzvah of education renders the minor a responsible party. We have a Hebrew school out there. We should be seeing that those are kids who are not only that we are responsible to parents because they pay tuition, and the parents are responsible for their kids. They're human beings out there, little human beings. And they have their own life and their life ahead of them, and they have their own responsibilities, whether they know it or not. And we want to help them in their responsibility, not just the parents. Text 11. Sadly, many parents worry about their children's material concerns, food, clothing, toys, and the like, whereas when it comes to other things, such as the all-important concern that the child grow up as a proper mensch, they don't pay as much attention, whether it is because of financial concerns or other matters. They rely on the fact that their child will get everything they need from school. And I'm familiar with that syndrome.
Okay,
A question, thank you for, okay. If the mole is allergic to peanuts, and the Shabbat meal prepared, you always come with the best ones there. Okay, if the mo is allergic to peanuts, and Shabbat meal prepared included the utensils that were used to prepare it were previously used with peanuts. Can a new meal prepared for the mo during Shabbat, such that the mo would be properly nutrition prior to executing the procedure? I would say that in certain scenarios, according to that that opinion in the Talmud that I mentioned, Rabbi Elazar, then in certain scenarios that would work. In today's scenario, no, I mean, yeah, you can make a meal, but make a meal only as it's permitted on Shabbos. But according to that opinion, it said you could go and do and forge the metal of the knife. If the mole was starving, yeah, probably could. If the mole was just had to eat bananas, you probably couldn't get away with that. And gefilte fish. It is regarding such an attitude that the Torah stresses that the party primarily responsible for children's education is his or her parents. The school is only the parent's agent in this mission. As such, even if the parents send their child off to school, the responsibility remains on the parents' shoulders. So the education of a child, Torah is telling us, is a parent's responsibility. We need schools. Schools are our agents. They're not surrogate parents, and they're not, and I don't think that, again, I don't want to get it. But this is certainly a Torah idea. Of course, the children need schooling. However, it is not enough. The parents must do whatever they can to educate their own children. Text 12. Educating children, our students, along the proper path requires a lot of hard work. Even if one has dutiful children or students for whom one word is enough to get them into line, the educator must not make the mistake of thinking that their job is done. Even in such situations, the educator must invest and work hard on the job to the degree that the Torah can label it hard work. The reason they do that is because the Talmud calls education difficult work. The difficult work of education lies on the teachers very often, and that has to be respected. And we're saying, so there's a balance here, because again, I don't want to go too far along this line, but if someone says, I'm a teacher, and the kid's getting neglected at home, the parents are not taking care of them. A responsible educator is not going to say, hey, it's not my job. My job is to teach 2 + 2 is 4, whatever it is, in a gym, and I don't think they're not getting nutrition at home. Not my deal. You care about kids. You care about kids. So of course there are going to be situations where an educator, if it's a severe situation, an educator would want to step up and say, I got to. There has to be a body I can turn to and say, these kids are not getting what they need at home. At least from what I can tell, that someone's going to help step in and to protect the kid if a parent, because not every parent is that great. Not every parent could be trusted. Of course, none of us are perfect, but the idea, there are such things, abusive parents. What if a kid comes to school and has God forbid, cigarette burns? So of course there's times to step in for that, and there has to be a body to do that, and that's an educator can't, just like a parent can't just say, hey, it's up to the school. The school can't just say it's all up to the parents, but the primary obligation, first of all, the primary obligation lies on the parents, and the school is helping them do their work. That's number one, assuming that they're healthy. And number two, we have to think it's the kids. It's the kids' obligation too. Text 3, parents' primary dedication ought to be to provide their children with a robust Jewish education. Text 13. Parents should be committed to raising children who are pious, God-fearing, and students of the Torah. This will bring both parties lasting joy. When parents decide to commit their energy to providing their child with nice clothing so that he or she can be the best dressed kid in the neighborhood, well, such joy only lasts a day, a week, or a month, or even a year. But thereafter, when the child matures, it becomes obvious that he or she was deprived of true joy that could have lasted their entire life. And you never want to judge someone else's home or whatever it is, but certainly there is this idea, especially in an area like this, where thank God it's not a poor area, that there's a feeling like I want to give kids everything I can give them, and often that translates into their minds into stuff, or even an expensive education. It's not only about that, it's about making sure that they have meaning in their lives. So the key points are, There's a mitzvah to count the days between Pesach and Shavuos in anticipation of the gift that is Torah. This is called Sefirat HaOmer. So, but that also, it's setting the stage. Number two is a parent is obligated to educate or train their child in mitzvah observance and Torah study once the child is mature enough. Number three is while this obligation is incumbent upon the parents, in as much as the child is a critical party to the obligation, it extends over the child as well. And finally, parents must take the responsibility of giving the child a robust Jewish education seriously. It requires robust and seriously, probably the same. I don't know. It requires commitment and hard work without relying on others to do it.
So how the point one connects to points 2, 3, and 4?
Explain your question, please. Why shouldn't they?
So you gave us the.
Oh, no, one means because it's the same idea where we value the Sefira, the counting of the Omer, every year, even though it's only just setting a stage. When we count now down to Shavuot, we're setting a stage. We do it every single year. Every year we revisit the anticipation we had in Egypt, thinking about waiting for. Do you see a parallel to that and setting a stage with a child with education or the other things?
It's a giant leap. Yes, that's about.
Is it
right.
really?
Yes.
Okay, I don't see. So maybe I didn't. Let me.
Rabbi told us.
What?
Told us.
No. There are mitzvahs, and there are holidays. Passover is a holiday. Shavuos is a holiday. They celebrate events. Got out of Egypt, you got the Torah. The 49 days between Passover and Shavuos, I'm celebrating an event. It's a recognition and a memory of a 49-day bridge we traversed, going from Passover from Egypt to Sinai, and preparing ourselves in anticipation of what would be the beauty of Sinai. In and of itself, it's not an event. It's anticipation of an event, which is good, but it's anticipation of an event. Anticipation for your wedding, that was important, but it wasn't an event. And you're probably not gonna reenact it every year. But we do. We go through that every year, even though it's not the event. Then we don't make a shechi on it. And we're not pretending that counting the Omer is an event like Passover and Shavuos. But it is something that we go through every year. Why? Because setting the stage, getting the journey to the destination of a mitzvah is also a mitzvah. It's not just that now you're 13, now you're going to put in tefillin, now all of a sudden Jewish life starts. You're 12, you're lighting Shabbos candles, all of a sudden like Jewish life starts.
Once, and you count days, 49 days every year.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
You become 13 only once,
That's right.
but you count 49 days every year.
So why is that? I don't understand why that's a question.
Do you celebrate the last 13 every year? You left Egypt only.
Well, that's it, but I don't understand.
Okay, one of the things that was said earlier,
Yeah.
49 days between leaving Egypt and the giving of the Torah. Now, does that allow for the 40 days that Moses spent on the mount getting the 2 tablets, and then the additional 40 days?
That was after.
In other
49
words,
days. The 49 days is before that the whole drama. It was leading from Passover until they got the Torah. They got the Torah, and then the whole new drama with the breaking of the tablets and the golden calf started. It's not
okay.
49 days, 40 days. It's we're into, got to keep track of the Jewish calendar.
And did they know where they were going and where the destination
Oh
was
yeah.
and why?
Yes. And actually that's very clear scripturally also. That they knew that they're going out, that they were going, and Moses knew before when he had his experience of the gold with the burning bush, and God says, "Go take the Jews out of Egypt." If you look at that language, because he's like new to all this, God says, "Go tell Pharaoh to let my people go, and you'll get them out, and you will come back to this mountain, And you'll
So-
serve God. That was on Mount Sinai.
Oh, so God said, and Moses went to Mount Sinai.
He was at Mount Sinai. He was just trying to be a shepherd. He didn't know.
Okay, so he had to go back.
He said that God said, you will serve God on this very mountain. That's the language of the scripture.
So Moses knew about Sinai before he took the Jewish people. He was there prior.
That's
That's why he-
the basic, that's the screenplay. That's the text.
And who sent them to Mount Sinai first time?
He was out as a shepherd taking care of his father-in-law's flock.
Gotcha.
And one strayed,
And
and one strayed.
yeah, that one's straight, exactly.
Now, why do you count up and not count down? If they knew where they're going and what was gonna happen,
Right.
we
So
count down. Yeah.
that's what that would be in our thinking. That would be normal. It's only 48 days left, 47 days left. But here it was each
Well,
day.
there's anticipation. I
Right.
mean,
So part of this is that every day it was a day of them trying to make themselves into better people, to get into a position where they were going to be appropriate recipients of the Torah. So they took their days with them. It was 1 day, 2 days. It doesn't say, even the Omer won't say it's a second day. It's 2 days, it's 3 days. We take our days with us because we want them to be substantive days with us, transformative days. So in other words, it's not just, we were talking now in terms of days toward an event. Really also days in preparation of an event. And
so you build up to it,
correct.
so the numbers have to go up rather than counting down.
Because you're taking them with you.
Because what?
You're taking those days with you, so to speak, because you're taking the progress and the actualization of those days,
So
the
it's
evolution.
like, and they tell you, you have those calendars where each day you rip off a page
Mhm.
to turn it over and write on the back what you did that day.
That's right. I'm probably going to say that later at the Bud Mitzvah. Yeah.
No.
All right.
I get my bill.
Okay. Be well, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you.